morning, but we're in good company, so what could be better?
There you go.
As I think I indicated in an email, before we get to the materials that Alex and the rest of the staff put together for us, I wanted to turn to David on the matters dealing with the filing of the preparation of the certificate applications and so forth that you've circulated among the group. What you've got in mind?
Might be, with your permission, try to wrap up what is almost wrapped up before we move on to the next item.
I'd like to start with.
Start with this?
Yeah.
Okay. But my thinking here is that in an attempt to get drawings that are appropriate to the submission, that there should be written some kind of minimum threshold for the submission of drawings, or let's just call them illustratives. Drawings, photographs, photographic collages, hand sketches, hand drafting, whatever it is. And tied into that is this coming move to all digital, which Alex mentioned last week. So to that end, I've highlighted the sections of the current standards which might be affected. And I have on the third page a probably too long list of things to talk about in terms of putting together some kind of written description of what a minimum illustrative submission should be.
Alex, do you have a copy of that? Andrew, both of them?
This what you handed out to us at our last meeting,
Yeah,
I believe.
Emailed
Yeah.
it as well.
And you emailed them as well?
right.
Watch, can you pull it up on the screens?
3 pages.
Does that look, that it? Do we have a date range idea of when that was sent out so I can just kind of help search?
I emailed it yesterday or day before, most recently.
Last week.
I think Eric actually copied you on it, Alex. I don't know that I included you in my email. So it would have come from, I think, from Eric.
Search from Eric. That's what I was trying to run down here.
Send it again?
Can you send it real quick again to Alex?
Sure.
One of them will get there somewhere. Alex will find it.
I need you to forward it to me, actually.
To It's coming. We're still working on it.
Make sure you guys are unmuting your mic.
Okay, there, I'm sorry.
Tom, you didn't get it?
I got it. I just want to make sure staff has it, because it's not going to do any good for us to talk about it unless they're looking at the same thing. And they don't have it.
They don't have it.
They don't have it. That's what we're working on, is getting a copy to them.
Ann's email is faster than mine.
Yeah, it just came through. There we go.
Yeah. that's
There
it.
we go.
I think we probably start on page 3. Counterintuitive as that may be. All right, so number one really is a discussion about the variability of the kinds of submissions we get. Sometimes it might be a window, sometimes it will be a hotel, and everything in between. So my suggestion is that this written threshold should be flexible enough and tied to the complexity of the proposed work, instead of being a single set of standards, which might be too much for one project and not enough for another. The second is the scale of the drawings, and this is really, before we get to that, in my mind, the scale of the drawing is also a function of how it's prepared, whether it's hand-drawn or CAD drafted or sketched, or it's a photo montage, whatever it is. But to me, the scale of the drawing is important so that the detail that's necessary to be illustrated is clear to the person who's reading it. This is not the same as the size of the paper that it's on. In particular, when we're doing digital submissions, the size of the paper is pretty much irrelevant. The scale is what's important and how it's prepared. Next, in terms of things that are digitally uploaded, two basic ways to do that. One is completely digital, which can be very crisp and clear, and can, if prepared at a high enough resolution, can be zoomed in to see even more detail. The other is by scanning a document that was prepared in some other way, hand-sketched or hand-drawn or photographic or those kinds of things. The scanned-in versions of drawings are always less, you can't zoom into them as clearly as you can for one that's made digitally. So in coming up with some way to accept documents digitally or uploaded, the preference in my mind would be digitally prepared over scan. Now, obviously, you can't digitally prepare a hand sketch, so some threshold level of resolution should be defined for those kinds of documents. Number 5 is some suggestions for minimum scales for different kinds of drawings or illustrations or illustratives. 6, plans and elevations are the key drawings that are helpful, I think, for what we're doing. Site plan, in particular roof plan, which can, of course, be on the site plan, and elevations of the portions of the structure that are being proposed. Text sizes, minimum, if it's CAD, I think 8-point is fine, 3/16 if it's hand drafted. Alex, I'm not sure how you guys are thinking of accepting a hand sketch from an applicant. In any event, if it is a hard copy that's subsequently going to be scanned by the staff, then it ought to be delivered to you at 100% of its drawn scale, so that you have a shot at scanning it at that percentage. Item 9 just talks about correlating those 2 pages that were highlighted. One is 2E and the other is Appendix C, so that they agree with each other. There is currently...
Catch the TVs up, please. We're on item 9, third page.
There's currently some conflicts between those 2 pages, so we ought to get those correlated so they agree with one another. And, Alex, I think since we're not quite digital now, it seems to me that rolling out some kind of a written standard ought to be coordinated with the institution of the digital application so that there's not kind of this 2-step change. If we were to prepare it today for things that are not digitally submitted, it would be a different set of language than if it were digitally submitted. Uh, 10 talks about various ways to upload stuff of different formats. In general, what minimum resolutions would produce an easy-to-read document. And the last one has to do with submittals of colors. Obviously, what you see online is pretty much worthless. And what you see off somebody's home printer is pretty much worthless. It seems to me the best route is to have an actual submission of the actual material available for us in our meeting here. And that's it.
I think that last point has the ancillary benefit of getting people, in lieu of having to prepare that, to actually select a color that is specifically named in the color palette. Unintentional perhaps, but moving in a good direction.
I have a couple questions, David. Would you make these all mandatory?
No, I think that's the real challenge is to come to an agreement amongst us about what our goal is, and then taking a stab at actually producing some language that makes that work.
So, without talking to any specific case, I'm not clear on what hand-drawn means anymore then, because...
Well, two basic ways, yeah, sure. When I say illustratives, I'm talking about a whole range of different kinds of graphic materials. But if we break it down to just drawings, there are computer-prepared drawings, CAD, which is all digital. And there are hand-drafted ones with a pencil or a pen and a ruler or a T-square or a drafting machine on paper or a hand sketch freehand. Those two differences.
But we've seen photos with drawings on them. Where do you come down on that?
That's, I would say that is an illustrative, one of the acceptable ways to present an idea. But there should be more to it. It has to be drawn to a recognizable scale. It has to be drawn to scale. It has to have a minimum scale that can be legible. It has to be uploadable when the time comes, all of those things. But I'm not trying to restrict the large variety of ways to prepare an illustrative. Just these are the minimum characteristics of whatever way you choose.
And I think, David, you were not, in all cases, you didn't always select either must or should, but we're going to come back to some musts or some shoulds. Overall, I like the direction that you're going here in terms of, I guess we don't have guidelines anymore. Setting, if we have standards, then we should let people know what the standard is. They may not always meet it, and then we can accept or reject or request additional information. But if we at least set something out that's relatively clear as to the standard that we expect and that Alex and others on staff expect, now you've got a baseline. All the major builders will adapt to this quickly, I think.
And I think it's important because unless we give something like this to the staff to work from, they don't have a standard for which to, and I'll use the term standard, not meaning necessarily in our standards, but a standard to work to so that they can point to something when somebody comes in and says, how do I do this application? Because if I'm not mistaken, Alexandria, they come to talk to you about questions they have. Is that correct? And if we've got some guidelines or standards as he's proposed, then you've got something to point to. If we just leave it, yeah, give us a drawing, it's a non, I mean,
What does that mean?
what's it mean?
So I think this is a good jumping off point. I think more than anything, educational material to the applicant is going to be beneficial. At the end of the day, as we've stated, if someone gives us a completed application, we can verify that they have standing of some sort or have a property owner's authorization to pursue that request, we'll have to, and the fee is paid, we'll have to accept it. Another good point is, as we are moving all digital, the effective date of that is first of the year. So I think we as staff can work, and we're going to hold a builder's workshop, which we do prior to COVID, we would do yearly. There's a new electrical code that's being rolled out, so there's already been a small workshop on that, along with the new buffer ordinance, which council adopted at their last meeting. There's a lot of opportunities to educate our greater applicants. Now, it's going to be a little tough to reach the general property owner who wants to change a roof, change some windows, et cetera. As David mentioned, it is very difficult to apply a set standard across, but these are, as you see the language, they're strong suggestions, and they will definitely help an applicant's case if you want the commission to be able to arrive at a decision at that public hearing and not wait another month or further. So I think this can give staff an opportunity to work on some educational material, maybe having a real hard set standard in the standards is going to be extremely difficult to nail down. But if we have as an education, as a suggestive material, that we start to really sit down with each and one of the applicants now that we're going to have more capacity and time to do that. The problem with the online submissions is they're not necessarily coming to Village Hall, and then one of the nice ladies at the front desk aren't calling one of us to run up and sit down with them. So we're going to, now that, again, COVID has kind of seemingly, and we hope has, doesn't have a stronghold on us, we can meet more freely with the applicants and have that opportunity in the weeks leading up to the public hearing to tell them this this probably isn't going to pass muster. We're going to need something a little bit better. We see these scanned images that could be difficult at zooming or clarifying or pixels or colors from one monitor screen or from one printer to another. You better bring something here at the public hearing. So I think really that's going to be a lot of what staff's going to be able to do is provide education to the applicants.
I mean, I think the fact, Alex, that you might receive something digitally to begin with doesn't mean that you can't then pick up the phone and call the person back and say, you should bring more.
This doesn't look like this could be sufficient enough for 7 folks to make a determination.
Okay, well, maybe we ought to put some of this in the application then. So when that they complete the application, they have the standards that we're talking about to go do that. I mean, that's not uncommon. We've got a couple of other attorneys here. What you have certain forms, you have certain things you have to submit to a court, and if you don't submit those, you don't get a case.
Yeah,
I
in other
mean-
words, can we empower you guys with the ability to say insufficient application?
If our application that we have on file at the time, which is the application that you guys see, if it isn't complete or the fee's not paid, then yes. If it doesn't have, I mean, because again, you forget, there's the public hearing. That's the be-all, the end-all.
Well, I agree with that, and it's the same with the court of law. There is a trial, or it goes up, leading up to that, there is a process in front of an adjudicating authority, but that doesn't mean you can't ask for certain things in the application. And maybe I'm not saying all of this, because I think probably some people's eyes would glaze over, but if we put it in the application, then that gives you the authority, the right to say, no, we don't do this.
So, okay, again, because I am a certified zoning official with the state of North Carolina, I am not a judge or a practicing attorney.
Right.
Neither are you guys in this respective role
Right.
that you guys
I
have.
agree.
So help me understand, if in a court of law, if you're to be heard, who makes the decision on whether or not the case will go before the judge?
All right, look, the way it's done today in civil litigation, not criminal, because that's different. The modern way of handling it is, in a civil trial, a certain number of weeks before the actual trial is scheduled, both sides have to submit to each other their list of witnesses, their list of exhibits, full disclosure of expert witnesses, they're subjected to depositions and so forth and so on, so that when the actual trial starts in court, both sides are fully informed about the opposing side's case, what the evidence is, what the testimony is going to be. And the rules are very explicit about exactly what has to be done. So when we have, for example, in our standards, we say, this says 3 weeks, and what David's got says 4 weeks, but it doesn't really matter. The deadline for receipt of completed applications for major work is 3 weeks before each monthly hearing. Okay, completed applications. That means, as I see it, you don't put a case on the docket unless you have received a complete application. Now, fact is, we know that that's not going to be done in every single instance. Something will be left out. You'll tell them, you got to make sure you submit that before the hearing, but we'll put you on the agenda. Maybe it's not submitted, it's not complete, it's absent entirely. You identify that so that by the time we get our packages for 3 or 4 work days before the hearing, it's complete. And we don't get any surprises in terms of documents at the hearing. We have an opportunity to ask the applicants to explain, but we shouldn't be having to deal with new materials. We do. I mean, it happens.
And it happens in a civil trial, too. Is something is uncovered, you still have the ability to bring it in. You're not
Well,
precluding
the
anybody.
judge,
from-
the judge can exclude it.
So that's what I was going to get. So if a civil trial is to be heard, and there is insufficient evidence, testimony, witnesses, whatever that is going to be presented by either side or either party, is the judge the one who decides that it doesn't go as scheduled in the hearing?
Well, in the first instance, let me just refer to some
Or,
administrative
or-
law.
or is there an administrative professional
Yeah,
who
there's
stops it?
staff who will determine whether an application should be accepted for filing at all. And the commission may never see that application. They won't see the application until staff has said, look, you forgot this, 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 and this. And it will never go beyond staff.
So
That's why I'm
give me-
saying-
Give me, let me give an example from the most recent hearing. It's a small example, but it's, happens to be a building that I drive by every day, and so it was important to me. And that's the Linden Road house, where they were going to turn the garage into a family room. One of the parts of the application was to build a shed in the backyard. As submitted, there wasn't any detail about what that shed was to be, other than a drawing with dimensions on it, okay? And then they came into the hearing with a drawing that showed what the shed was going to look like. So we said fine, and we approved it. A small thing, but you didn't have to accept that application and put it on the agenda, because you don't get on the agenda until you have submitted a completed application for major work. So if the applicant hasn't put everything in there, you as the staff have the discretion to say, this is not complete yet, so you don't get on the hearing schedule that you want to be on. Hopefully you tell them that 48 hours in advance of their deadline.
But
and they get
discretion
there.
might be the tough part, because I understand you don't want to be the bad guys. We should have rules that staff can point to and say, look, we'd love to accept it, but look, we can't. Them's the rules.
And we can't exercise discretion.
Right.
And that's why I'm
the-
saying
tough-
that kind of stuff probably ought to look at being in the application, so you don't have to.
But
So,
the standards now say the deadline for receipt of completed applications. That's right in there. I'm not saying you have to be hard-nosed about this in every instance, but if you as staff, I mean, you see these things all the time. You say, hey, this is a minor thing that's absent, and they say they're going to bring it in at the hearing. I don't think the commission's going to have a problem with that. On the other hand, if you look at it and you say, I don't think the commission can make a judgment about this application unless they have X, Y, and Z, and they haven't given us X, Y, and Z.
The example you give, Eric, is one that I'm not arguing against. I think that is, if someone, let's say, with these proposed changes, that shed was something that could be classified as minor work. Well, aside from just a simple site plan, isn't enough for staff to make an objective determination on that. So that, I completely understand. That part should not have moved forward, or unless been part of another application. I understand that. Where you mentioned, we don't have to be hard-nosed on every single situation. Well, now we're opening ourselves up to being arbitrary in how we're accepting.
And I
So
think
that's difficult.
we owe the staff that set of rules that Ann was talking about to do that. So we need to develop those.
Determine a minimum for something that runs again, but that's not, I don't disagree that that's a bad idea. It's going to be a very difficult charge. For a fence, a tree removal, window additions, removing windows, siding material, paint, it's kind of simple,
And
straightforward.
I agree, it's not 100%, but I think we need to give you better standards for which to do it. And it's not like, you guys are, I know, pushed for staffing over there. That's well known, at least I believe it is, what you're standing on. Have you got the staffing you need to be able to do this in 3 weeks? If we get 10 of them? I'm seeing,
It depends. I can't really answer that question. It
Well,
really
and the reason I bring that up is because the last meeting, you sat here and said, well, if we go back to paper packages, then I can't guarantee you I'm going to get it here by the Friday.
And a lot of that has to do because you have initial staff contact, you have initial staff review of applications, you have the back and forth, you have then the labeling of all the agenda material, then you have the staff report and analysis, then you have 2 reviewers for that, and then when it gets pushed through and then the administration takes its final review and the agenda's posted, then there's the printing, the collating, so yes, that is an administrative burden. If we get, it could be 10 cases, 6 of which require 10 minutes of staff review, so I can't answer.
But you made that statement the last week. And
Or
that's-
printed copies, yes.
Yeah, and for printed copies. And I think most of us that were here asked for printed copies when we wanted. So I think that's another issue for another discussion, whether you guys give this deadline for now January when we're going to go fully electronic. But that, I don't want to get into that right now. We need to take care of the now and the place. And I think your position of, well, we can't make those decisions is true. And in a court, the court has clearly, by a set of standards, delineated exactly how this procedure is to run so that the clerk or the staff supporting the court can look up and say, no, it needs to be, if it's going to be that, it needs to be, if it's going to be handwritten, it's 3/16-inch hand draft, and I don't expect people to break out a ruler and look at 3/16 to make sure it's not 1/8 of an inch less or more, but it needs to be in that area to do it.
It isn't, I think as one of the non-attorneys here, isn't the goal to be able to allow staff to advise an applicant? I don't think this is going to work. I've seen how the 7 people make their deliberations.
Good
and
luck.
they're going to have a whole bunch of questions for you that you haven't addressed here, versus looking it over and saying, you know what, the vast majority, now, you may think it's all in there,
There may be something.
and then the question comes up, and all of a sudden, no, there's something that we've really missed. So I think that this is the purpose of having standards, is not that they will be ironclad and everything is black and white. It is to reduce the amount of gray, and that's all we're trying to do, I think, by arming staff with enough tools that they can provide valuable input to applicants.
Right, and I think Alex is absolutely right. He doesn't, unless it's minor work, have any authority to decide what those standards are. Those have to come from us. They can't come from any other place. But if we say this is what we want from staff, and we're relatively clear in it, now it doesn't say they won't be adjusted over time or won't be worked out, but then staff has the right to say, no, this is what the HPC said they wanted, and this is what we have to produce to get it in front of them. And it takes you out of the decision-making, the majority of the decision-making process, which is what you're concerned with. And you shouldn't be making decisions about whether it's right or wrong. We're just talking about a set of standards of how it's presented, so that we don't sit here and when you've got 10 of
Perhaps it
them.
could be as simple as illustrative or CAD drawing.
Photos, site plan, sketch plan,
Yeah.
Photo.
elevations where
If
applicable,
existing property.
materials or colors where
Materials,
applicable.
yes.
That's
Something, a checklist
That's an
just like that.
administrative decision when you're looking at an application to say, no, there isn't enough there to make any kind of real decision.
And I think,
That's not asking for you to set a standard or to make a decision.
No, we should.
I think
and
that-
I want to follow up on what Judge Schroeder has just been telling us, because, I think we could help us, if we strengthen this language that you just, the deadline for completed applications and so forth, by adding a sentence that says something along the lines that incomplete applications that do not meet the requirements of, and then reference the appropriate thing, will not be accepted, will not be scheduled for hearing. So that you can point to that either face-to-face or over the internet or the phone or whatever, say, hey, I can't schedule you. You have to provide me with X, Y, and Z. It says so right in here, and you haven't done it. You know, if you want to get in next month, you got to get it to me by such and such a deadline.
And it saves the applicant a lot of agony during a hearing, perhaps, too.
At the end of the day, that's who we're here to serve.
Right.
Right.
We're serving the
Right.
citizens of Pinehurst and not
And
ourselves.
We
but
could
them.
make it very easy for them if they have a checklist and they're
So-
not surprised, like, oh, I had to bring color
We're
samples.
not trying to make it hard for them.
Right, right.
I don't think any of us is suggesting adding requirements that aren't necessary. I think the requirements are there. They obviously have to evolve with the technology, and which David is giving us some great insights into.
Well, I think the idea is not objective but subjective. Is enough, the information that was submitted in the original application, is that sufficient for staff to make an on-site review? If they can approve it, then we should be able to make a decision on that. That's as simple as it gets, in my opinion.
So what I think we can do is we can look at some of the forward language in this section about what happens if it isn't complete. We can take another look at the checklist. Alexandria's already worked and got a pretty substantial informative application packet put together that she will use in receiving applications for major COAs and minor COAs. It's going to talk about the public hearing process. It talks about, the standards themselves. And then it's going to have a certification that I've submitted what material with my application. Now, the list, I think, of what's going to necessarily be quote-unquote required for a completed application is going to be short. Because again, it's just going to be really difficult and there's going to be a few where applicables. But I think that's a place we can start and we can bring that for consideration. We can update Appendix C and we can update the forward of this section to see, bring some revisions and see if that gets a comfort, if it starts providing to a level at the hearing or when the packets and agendas are made live, and just see if that's going to start progressing in the direction we want to.
I think that's great. I think that's where we need to go.
Yeah.
Let me just ask or raise one other issue, which is related to what David's been talking about. One of the applicants at the last meeting was presented with the fact that they had several different versions of the same exhibit. And it was confusing to the commissioners as to which one was the applicable one. And the applicant said, we updated and sent in the new version, and we don't have a way of withdrawing the previous version that's now been superseded. So that's why there were multiple, not quite the same versions of the same exhibit. Now, I assume that's a technical problem that can be addressed, and it should be. And we shouldn't have to leaf through multiple, but not quite the same copies of the same exhibit. It's relatively easy for somebody who understands this stuff like David, but for the rest of us lay people, that can be very confusing.
And I want to go back too, and because I think it's critical to what you mentioned. We do this for the people of Pinehurst, and I absolutely agree with that. But bringing people in here and allowing them to come in with an inadequate application and setting them in front of us and then tearing it apart is not particularly the way you service people in doing that. I mean, I'll take the one you just brought up with the two drawings in there. I mean, that to me would have been embarrassing to say, well, that's what I gave that commission was this two drawings and it didn't make any sense. So you got to balance both of those sides. I agree. We need to do it in a timely manner. We need to do it, but bringing them in here and not having enough information and then making them say, extend it to the next meeting and so on is not particularly good service either.
I understand that, and that was nothing that staff was intending to do.
I'm not saying it
in that
was.
meeting. But I mean, we have a responsibility as staff. We know that. We understand that. I think if a hearing goes the way it did at that last meeting, no one carries that burden bigger than staff.
We all do, because
we-
we're sitting here.
We identified that. We noticed that. So give us the opportunity to right the ship.
I have a few thoughts, if I may. For many years, submitting drawings for building permit, at the intake counter, they check to be sure that your submission is complete. It doesn't go across the counter until somebody leaves through it and says, okay, this is complete, you're hereby submitted. There ought to be some online version of that review by staff before the application is submitted for more detailed review.
We have that.
And to do that, there ought to be a list of things for you to check against, and that's what I think is missing.
We,
Does that now?
yeah, and two, there's a couple of different things here. Regular applications, checking for completeness, and then our online situation. We're still evolving with that. We tried to go really hard early on with it when we did a soft opening where you couldn't even get past step 2, much less get to step 3 for a fee if you didn't have a licensed general contractor number. Well, we had to come back from that, or if you didn't have a professional surveyor, if you didn't have your electrician yet set up. So we're continuously moving with that. There's a lot on the back end that staff's doing. Yes, I mean, we are human, but.
Yeah, none of these things I'm saying are criticisms at all.
Okay, I understand.
And I appreciate
helps
this
the
is a
process.
moving target, and we're all
Very much.
developing new things every day.
So one thing that we're talking about with our software is one very big thing that came out of the Chapter 160D legislation is basically a completeness, a determination of completeness on an application. Typically, our steps on the back end, I don't know if any one of you guys have used our online system yet or not. David, I don't know if you did for your new construction, but
No.
there's an application acceptance, there's a filing either by front desk staff or by, an applicant on the other side. There's a acceptance, and then there should be a completeness check in each one of those. So we're
Getting there.
we're evolving. I mean, come first of the year, it's going to be, we've been operating like this since 2019, really. But we're still taking them in this way, we're taking them in that way. There's a lot of things coming through. So I think, yes, Richard, we are doing completeness checks for various types of applications, whether it's a mechanical single trade or whether it's a new single family or it's a hotel, as you mentioned.
The second,
Requirement, I'm sorry, that you have a photo, if it's an existing though, that's really super helpful when I'm looking at it, but apparently that's not,
I
you
think
guys
the
don't
answer
care
to
about
that is
it?
yes, we can make that a requirement for.
Oh, but I mean, what does everybody think? I just think it's real helpful
If
on
it's
an
applicable,
existing.
if you're changing something to an existing structure, I think that's important, to know what the heck's there and then what the heck's changing. If you're doing a fence, or if you're doing a new accessory building, maybe not, do you need something, but if the standard is it's compatible or similar to the colors of the existing home, maybe you need a photo of the existing home to be able to check that.
Well, even with a fence, a photo of where it's going to be is kind of helpful.
Or
in your-
drawing on the fence, I mean, you get
The site plan,
Survey
that's what
site-
the
site
site
plan.
or sketch
Yeah.
plan's for.
So,
I have a couple other things, if I may. The problem of the uploading and the desire for us to have paper copies, not unusual for me to have had to submit multiple copies to the jurisdiction, one for each commissioner, for example, by the applicant, not by the staff. So instead of turning in one, you turn in 7 for us and a couple for you. That's the applicant's burden.
That's what we used to do. Again, that's changed now, but we used to require 10 copies, 10 hard copies to be
thank the Lord you
submitted.
don't do that anymore.
Oh, they still are doing that, because we're halfway between the two, right?
No, we're not getting 10 copies of anything.
Why not?
Does it cost money? It's a burden. I mean, we're doing this, who here has made submission? in front of this HPC?
Not me.
Long time ago. The reason I joined in the beginning is because, a long time ago,
How long ago?
2013.
Okay.
when you were in Cherokee? Yeah. It's an intimidating process. And I think I wanted to be on here because the good thing about all of us is we bring different strengths, different backgrounds, architectural backgrounds, legal backgrounds, construction. I'm more of a real estate property rights person. A lot of us may be, but, the whole point of this is suggestions and recommendations to help people bolster their case so they have a higher likelihood of success in front of us, okay? I think we have so many checks and balances. We get to go see the properties, we get to walk them, we get to look at these reports a week in advance, and then if there's any clarifying things that we need, we have this public forum where we get to address this person and speak to this person. So it may not be perfect, but I feel like we're very good at picking and trying to make things better, and we've done so much progress in the last 2 or 3 years that I've been on this, and we're making great progress. But I think we're kind of trying to find issues that really don't exist. These aren't every single case that this happens. We get to quiz these people. The builders that come before us are incredibly professional. We've done some major changes to our guidelines that are now standards. And as a whole, I think we function really well as a body in quizzing these folks and doing good things. Obviously, something slips through here and there, but we're aware of them, we address them. And then it's for all of us individually to decide, either individually or collectively on the night, when they present their case in a public body on record, of how we're going to vote. And if it's not complete for you, David, you vote no. If it's complete for me, I vote yes. But that's the beauty of the subjectivity we bring as a group. But I feel like we're not even on agenda one, and we've spent 45 minutes. And this is great. Use this as FAQs. Use this as frequently asked questions or recommendations or suggestions, so that if there is that person who wants to go into this detail, who has a complex submission, great, let them use this. But for the lay person who doesn't have a builder show up next to them, this is intimidating as all get up. And I feel like we're going to create, if we go on this path, we're going to create something that's so complex and detailed, we're not serving that person anymore. We're serving us, making our job easier to review. But at the end of the day, we're trying to assist that person get their COA.
No, but I mean, I agree wholeheartedly with you, Richard, and our goal is to facilitate a nice, easy, friendly process. And that's why we just need a bare bones checklist so that when the applicants come before us, so poor people aren't sitting there going through the Spanish Inquisition with us on stuff.
Well, that
it's
shouldn't
taking-
happen either. I wasn't here last week, but if someone's, I'm sorry, it's not complete, and this is why, we'd love to see you next month. Work with staff. We should never tear someone. And I'm not saying that happened.
No,
but
it wasn't,
It
but
shouldn't be animosity. It shouldn't be aggressive.
No,
We
no,
can do
no,
it
but
differently.
And that's not the intent, and that's why the intent is to do some screening up in front of it so that you don't have to come here and be embarrassed because you don't have half of what you need. Because my first response, if I did that, is I'd look at his staff and go, why the heck didn't you tell me this? Why am I having to come here and find out that I need 6 pictures and a couple more drawings and 2 of them are wrong and so on and so forth? That's not a good service either.
Back to one of Ann's points, to get a written description of something that somebody wants, depending on how good a writer is, maybe that's okay, maybe not. If they give you a picture, it's a lot. A picture is worth 1,000 words, right? It looks like this now. This is what I want it to look like when I'm done. And that's easier than 3 paragraphs of writing.
I think there's some middle ground, and I think we can work to try to find where that is, somewhere out there. We'll try to get there.
I want to bring up
We're heading there.
I want to bring up an ancillary thing when we're done with this issue then, because it tags right onto this.
Is there anything more? you
Yeah,
want to add?
last thought is, when it comes time to do this first of the year, all digital submission, what is it that the commissioners will have to review?
Very similar to what you are now.
It'll be on paper
Digital, online.
or it'll be
PDF.
digital? Not expressing a preference.
I
just curious.
understand. So we have obviously heard and have heard for some time about how the commission likes to or has a preference of receiving their material. I'm going to suggest this decision be made by the policymakers that we all report to.
Might I, when we put this to them, offer some input?
You certainly could, but I would hope that all points would be considered in making that determination. We are obviously evolving. It's been a big goal in the 2019 comprehensive plan to move in a more digital environment. It helps us with record retention greatly. Again, that's an administrative call here. You know, I can see certain instances if there's a very big, complex project, if you have electronic issues, or if you're, you know, there can be a situation where, yes, an outlier here or there, that it would make sense to provide some sort of printed copy at some sort of size. We're not going to be able to plot 7 copies of a 24 by 36 plan every time. But, you know, I'm just letting you know, our understanding, our direction is we as a whole in the village, from village council down, is moving to a digital environment.
Well, my thought is that if the original document is bigger than 8.5 by 11, and it's uploaded to the site, let's say it's 24 by 36, it's time for the commissioners to review that document, taking that 24 by 36 document and printing it to fit on 8.5 by 11 is of little use. So in that instance, I would prefer a digital copy if I can't have one plotted to the drawn scale.
Makes total sense. I think that's a waste of paper to print something that's formatted for something at least twice its size, to then compress it and have it on 8.5 by 11 or 11 by 17 for that matter.
Right. So it might be that copies for the commission to review that whose originals are 8.5 by 11 could be printed. The others, maybe we rely on digital only. The problem is some people have a small laptop, that's it, and they're trying to scroll around a big drawing. That can be difficult.
And we have the capacity at Village Hall. We have large screens. We have touch screens. So staff doesn't have to have hard copies. So we can do some complex reviews on very detailed. The Cancer Center, for example, 130,000 square foot building with the electrical diagram for that. You know, you can just imagine our inspectors are reviewing those plans all digitally. So we can help. That is part of, you are an extension of our workforce. We can have that available to you. Now, kind of segmenting some parts of the packet, you know, it's going to be difficult for us to kind of keep that up. Just not saying that's a bad idea, but just if this person gets this and this person wants this one pulled out, and it could, you know, we might make a mistake here or there. Just
Also, I think the bigger the project, if we look at the hotel, for example, that's being done by a professional team. They're producing lots and lots of drawings. The few that we actually got in our hands is a drop in the bucket for them. Compare that to the submission for the shed, which consisted of a couple of small sheets. That's an entirely different animal. I don't think they need nor should they be treated in the same manner.
You guys determine that when it comes to you, so.
If we see something that's coming from the resort, if we see something that's coming from the village chapel, when we saw the elementary school, you knew this was going to be professional level work. Not to say that we're going to immediately say yes and just rubber stamp it, but we weren't likely to find major omissions, with the exception of the service entrance. It's a different question. Versus an individual coming to do something to their house.
We had some new home applications that we did in 5 minutes last meeting, so.
And they were well presented to us.
That's an indication both that the people did their homework and that there were guidelines that were sufficiently clear that they knew what they needed to do.
And
So
prepped by
to
staff,
comply with it.
and, you know, prepped by staff and coached by staff in their application and submission.
I mean, ultimately, any job is going to...
We are primarily an aesthetic.
Yes, external.
We are not trying to decide whether they put their electrical system in properly or not. You know, but we want to know, what does the proposed building or the proposed addition look like? What will it look like if we allow it? And then we can compare that to our understanding of what the special character of the Pinehurst Historic District is. So that goes to the question of, what size document do we need to look at? And if in order to make those judgments, we need to see something that in hard copy would be this wide, and we're not going to get it this wide, then we have to figure out a way to look at it on a screen. But what we're trying to decide is, what is the thing going to look like?
District.
I guess I'm looking for my next marching order. What I thought might be the next step would be to get some feedback after you've had a chance to review the thoughts, get some feedback from you, and then for me to take a stab at some language, or is that something that the staff is going to do? What's my next marching order?
I think what I would like to do is I would like for staff to take a stab at that opening paragraph. Include maybe some language about what happens if it's deemed to be incomplete. And then work a little bit more on that checklist and iron out a little bit of, I think Alexandria's in the 95% of completion of a educational application packet, which we could share with the commission and see if that's starting to really hammer home what we're going to suggest as a completed application. Again, there's going to be some requirement in there, but it's going to be a largely suggestive. And then there's going to be some additional information that, that educational that can help the applicant to determine, well, if I've got a paint sample and I can get a scanned copy or that over, or, send just search online and send it to you, but knowing that when I come to the hearing, I can hold up this pretty board that really shows just what 4 millionth shade of gray it really is in front of the commission. So, and I think we can share that with you guys, potentially if it's another special meeting or even at the end of a regular meeting coming up. We still have a couple more before the end of the year, and see if that sounds like that's a direction that the commission's happy with. And then we'll start applying it and see what the end product or end result is. See if it starts moving in a direction that you like.
David, I thought you did a nice job identifying the major items. It certainly is as good or better as I would have been able to had I done it, but I think at this point it probably should go to staff to come down to more specific documentation in the language that will conform to 160 and any other regulations.
I have one last thought. As an attempt to reduce the staff's workload, in a submission, whatever form it will ultimately take, the back half has been the applicant's actual submission. The front half has been the staff's review of that application. It's of no use to me at all to duplicate those drawings and illustratives that the applicant has in the back half. No need at all. It seems to me that you could skip that entire step and reference the application itself.
I think we're continuously adapting and evolving our staff reports, and I think we've got a couple ideas on that, so thank you.
Did you have something?
Yes, I did. A couple of things. I want to address what Richard said, because I think he was spot on, and is not to do that. And what Alex has brought up a couple of times by that checklist. I don't have the same heartburn if I bring somebody in here who's been offered a significant checklist and they don't follow it and then they embarrass themselves. That's their issue. But I do have issue if we don't give them anything that's there, and it's a trap then at that point. So I think Alex's idea and Alexandria's apparently effort is of coming up with a significant checklist is probably a good way to go, because then they have something they can use to make sure, and something for which to ask questions of staff. Half the time, somebody who comes in here who isn't an architect or contractor or something doesn't have any idea what questions to ask, so they can't ask the staff anything. So I really like the idea of the checklist, implying that and giving that to them at the time of the application, so that they can work through the application and use the checklist, I think is a very good idea, Alex. And both of you, and Alexandra, I appreciate you working on that at this point in time too, because I think it's spot on.
Well, I know you got a few points to make, so I'm not and that brings up a good point, like what you said, David. This list is really helpful, and maybe if you had FAQ section or it said recommendations from the committee or the recommendations on new construction residential, these items will assist in making a more complete application. And then you address this, and then it could be something where it's submittals that aren't as complicated, that maybe only require minor, these things would help you. So
Right.
all
The
those things
checklist.
assist them knowing, hey, what bucket do I fall in and how complex is this case? What kind of submission materials would I need to require?
And it gives them something to point to, too, to say, this is what you need to do if you want this to go smooth.
Yeah, you're in the complex bucket over here. You
Yeah,
got a
you're-
whole bunch of moving parts.
Right, you got a whole bunch of moving parts, so we're going to need that kind of stuff. So I think that's good. The other thing I want to talk about is this 3 weeks. That, to me, is almost a self-inflicted wound. If we're having trouble with putting this together, and I understand, I say trouble, but because of the complexity of this transition, and getting these through, as Alex brought up the last time about, well, I'm not sure I can meet Friday, what is wrong with moving this back, that 3 weeks and that standard back to 4th week, to give people more time to do that? I mean, 4 weeks is not an
Well, maybe
unreasonable.
we defer to staff on that, because a deadline's a deadline, and people are gonna bump up against it no matter how long it is,
Right,
right? So,
Go push it no
Um,
matter what, yeah.
So,
so
I mean-
I defer to you guys on that. I mean, for their workload.
And I think Tom's point is,
Helps off.
that gives us another week to try to pull everything we can out of them.
Right.
I mean, I think that's something we're still evaluating. One thing that has been a complicating factor with that deadline is the adoption of the current guidelines or standards, whatever you want to call them. Because as you've seen in the material we forwarded to you guys, the influx of major work items, it is completely inverted. When we had that deadline in place, too, it falls nicely with some of our other deadlines internally for other applications that require public hearings, and first of the month. It's pretty typical. It's going to be first of the month. That's easy. So when we're having 10 major work or 8 major work COAs,
yeah.
that's a little different. Before this 3-week deadline has been in place since 2006.
And it worked.
When it worked and we weren't having as much. So maybe this is a good segue into the next topic, is if, I think we need to keep evaluating that. And maybe we
I
do
don't.
go to 4 weeks.
No, I think we ought to go there, even if it's transitory at this point in time. There's nothing
Can change
says
it.
that after things,
We can
after
change
we
it.
get everything put together, but it ain't fair to the public to sit here and be us being the problem. We got 180 days by statute to get this done. So it's not like we're even coming close to the statutorial deadline. And I'm not anywhere near recommending that we go anywhere near 180 days. But adding a week, we're trying to do 6 different things at once. We're expanding the number of cases we looked at. Trust me, when I first got on this thing, for the first 2 years, 3 years, I don't think there were a dime that we had 10 cases. If it was definitely the exception to the rule, not the rule. Now, it's almost the rule to have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, many of them new construction, more complicated things to work with. And staff has got more things to deal with going to that. So I would say for at least a transitory period of time, that we seriously look at moving this back to 4 weeks to allow staff to work through it and get it. It does, because again, I go back, it does no good to bring somebody in here with an incomplete package or with problems in it.
And I mean, an extra week is an extra week, and to Ann's point too, I mean, I'm sure there's going to be a situation here or there where for 2 weeks, we could hammer somebody, and.
Yeah, but it's
It may or may
beyond that, beyond it. We're continuously getting large loads right now. So as long as it's up there, we need to add it. If it goes back to the point when we're getting 2, 3, 4 cases, then drop it back to 3 weeks if we want. But what's the use beating ourselves up if we recognize the problem, and it's not something that's just happened once or twice now. It has been pretty consistent.
In an ideal world, my view, each of these presentations would be done in 4 or 5 or 6 minutes.
Yes.
Because the material was clear, people are given an opportunity to speak. Other people, members of the public, are given an opportunity to comment, and it should be pretty cut and dried. And a lot of the things that we see, at least in my mind, pretty much think are cut and dried. But I don't think it's a bad idea to allow 4 weeks at the moment. And if we get to a point where we don't need that anymore, it can be changed again.
Sure. I mean, it's up to us to make well, we can't change it. It's up to us to make the recommendations to change the standards to the thing. But I think if we walk into the council with a clear reason why we're looking at it, from both the staff point of view and from our point of view, I don't see an extra week being anything terribly punitive in any size, shape, form, or manner. If it's
The important thing to my way of thinking, and I think I made this statement earlier, is that what you really need to be able to do is to be sure that the application is complete. Not just that they claim it's complete, but that it is. And so you're obviously going to have to take time to look at it. And if you look at it and you find that there are things that are left out, you've got one of two choices. You can say, we're going to take you off the agenda because you didn't give us a completed application, or, being the good guys that we all know you are, you're going to say, you missed this, this, and this. You've now got a week to fix those, and if you don't fix them, then we're taking you off the agenda. But, and I agree that the extra week makes sense in that context.
And in the current environment.
Yes. If the circumstances required, and it was a life and death situation, we could always do a special session.
That's right. We always have the case to do that.
Do two of these a month if we needed to, if there was something that important. But we
Our
haven't
new
had that.
construction cases in this most recent hearing were the easiest cases that we had on the agenda. They're supposedly the biggest issue. They were well presented. I don't recall that they involved any particularly subtle issues that we had to resolve. We had to go through the material, went through the material, because they gave it to us in good form. The individual, repair cases are the ones that sometimes give us heartburn because they don't quite fit into a formula, or the applicants don't really give us all the information we think we need, or whatever.
Not professional.
Yeah.
They're lay people.
And I don't want to make it punitive to them. They need the extra time to be able to do it. Somebody who's a contractor or an architect walks in here, they know exactly what we need. That's why we can do the ones you're talking.
Exactly.
But the ones that walk in here who have no clue what they're doing, like I would be if I were to present one, assuming I'd not sat here before, it would be a altogether different story, and it's going to take me longer to prepare it.
Well, would a further,
And it's going to take staff more time.
would it be helpful with expediting things if, as soon as you receive a complete application at staff, we can have it? Or we could have it earlier that way, so that you say, these are all the materials, and here's the application?
What would the intent of that be? What would you
Well,
use that
because part of
information
this
for?
crunch I'm feeling is because
I think I may have.
come
a
out
little
on
issue with
you
that,
come
too.
out on the Friday before, but if we can get them as they roll in and are deemed complete, we could start studying them right away, right?
Not to, once we send anything out to the commission, we also have to send it out to anyone else who's.
Well.
So what we've
Look
talked.
at the point they're submitted, right? At
Te-
what point?
Technically, but you have to be aware of that. If we're throwing it out there at you,
Well,
we
I
need to be
see
throwing it
signs
out
up
there to
before I
everybody.
ever see a piece of paper.
And that's where I'm going to go. What we're going to try to do at the end of this week, starting the end of this week, is once we send out the public hearing notifications and post the signs, which are the Friday, 2 weeks before, what we can do is we can send those out to the commission. So anyone else who's receiving a mailed notification, you know that
That'd be
at
great,
this property
yeah.
address, this person is seeking a major COA for this general description.
That'd be good.
Here's a map of the notification area. That's it. So you have an idea of what's going to be on the agenda as far as number of cases. You know the location. You can start getting familiar with where it is, but not necessarily anything else on the merits or additional information until the agenda is
But to be
posted.
clear, the application, once submitted into the village's intake is public, I
Right.
assume?
The application itself is the most important to me, not to make your review less consequential, but
Well, you have to be careful how you word that, because we have to make our decision on the total package. So what you would be getting is, clearly you need to understand, is only half the story. The villages is the other half. So if you will look at this as, there's two parties, if you will, in
Once
any
they deem
proceeding.
it complete,
Huh?
once they deem it complete, we could see it. That's what I'm
Well,
suggesting.
yeah, we can see it, but you've also got the other half that we can't, so you can't make decisions on it until you get the other half, and the other half comes from the village.
it'd be my belief is that I would not be making decisions until we meet here.
Right.
I wouldn't make a decision before I hear everything.
Okay.
See you, Terry.
Bye, Terry.
Appreciate it.
Okay, so 4 weeks, we're good with that. Take it or leave it. That's yours call.
Well, I think we ought to make it 4 weeks, and that ought to be the recommendation of the commission to
far as I'm
move it
concerned,
from
it's up
3
to
to 4
Alex.
weeks,
I
so
think
we
it
can
is.
get the change, because we got to change the standards, because the standards right now say 3 weeks, right?
I hereby accept whatever Alex says.
Yeah, I agree.
So moved. That's a
Well,
second.
we
Alex and
It's
Alexander.
not Alex's decision.
we don't adopt the standards.
No,
We
but we-
propose them to the village council.
And Alex don't adopt them, nor Alex doesn't propose anything that we don't recommend.
I would have a recommendation. I'm sure the council would want to know what staff's thoughts are.
Oh, I'm sure. You would also have your own recommendation.
And I'm not saying I don't disagree with what your thought is, but what I don't want to do is take something to council right now that just changes the submission deadline. This stuff here, I want to get, let's do this and let's throw the 4 weeks in there. Great.
Great, I absolutely agree, because they're going to get sick and tired of seeing us.
Piecemeal.
Even though there are a couple of new members on the.
They might like to see it, yeah.
They might like to meet us, but, you know.
Just as a matter of procedure, this is not something we have to formally propose and vote on.
No, this is a work
Not,
session.
not now. I mean, the time will come when we do.
Yeah, we have to have it ready to vote on, if you will. And I guess there really isn't. This is an open meeting. We could vote on it today, too, because the council does that.
Is procedure subject to the approval of the council? Did we
Yes.
nail that down? All procedural aspects of our,
Required by statute, I believe.
Not
unless
just the
160 said
standards.
we had to have a set of standards and a set of procedures in order to even exist.
And either in absence of basically, the governing board can say, you guys adopt your own, or we'll adopt blanket ones
But
for
there
you.
has to be a set.
And right now, you guys have your own.
Right.
our own procedure?
Rules of procedure, yes.
And do we have authority to revise that procedure
Sure.
without the approval?
Well, it wouldn't hurt to check and make sure that there is not a desire or will to change that or take that autonomy from you guys.
Right.
But as of now, there's been no change that I'm aware of.
Just asking.
But this is in the standards, so this does needs. If we go from 3 to 4, that has to be a standards change.
Absolutely, yeah.
Second, one other quick, and I don't even want to go more than to put it on the record. If we're going to go to electronic, to computer-rated stuff, and that's how we're going to do it, we need a computer device to use in the field. If you're going to go to where we want to do away with most of the paper and go do it, we need one to go in the field. That thing I have here is the only computer I have in existence in my house. Actually, there's a second one my wife uses, but basically the same thing. And that I'm not carrying into the field on a routine basis.
When you say in the field, you mean driving around or here at the?
Around, looking at the houses, so on and so forth.
So I would just say for 3, maybe more years now, each year, each department has their yearly strategy input session. And providing appointed boards with that material. It was ever since we went to the automated online agenda system. So I think that may have been 2017, actually. So subsequently, that next input session meeting, which would have been late 17, early 18, which that information is put into the SOP deliberations with the department heads and village council. That has been something that our department has flagged. I don't know that it made it this year because it has been up there for that long and it's never gained traction for one reason or another. Of course, there's a,
Well, we haven't gone to electronic.
yeah, well, that's a good point. Also, what our IT staff capabilities are, so that's where they have all that input. But that's a good point, and I would recommend if being ready to express that if you need. But we can't make that decision.
No, I'm not asking you to make a decision. As I said, I just wanted to get that on the record. If we're going to go electronic, then you got to provide me the equipment to do it. Otherwise, I want paper.
Do you want a new iPad? Is that what you want?
I don't care whether it's an iPad, an app, I don't care what it is, as long as it works in the field and I can look in color pictures, so when my pictures and my drawings and stuff are on there, I can look at them.
Staff just got one so we can do our inspection, so we're not having to print copies and go and do a
That's
follow-up.
exactly
There
my
could be
point.
some here that you pick up, you go see the sites, you bring it back,
But and
return
again,
it, sign in.
I don't care. I'll come pick it up, but I just need something to use in the field. Thank you.
Okay, David, thank you.
done.
Yeah.
This,
It is lots of detail.
I've proven to be
An
a good
architect.
prophet. I thought that your stuff was going to be a good way to get us going, and it was. Thank you.
My pleasure.
It got us going for an hour and a half.
We only drove out one member, so.
I'm going to be out in 30 minutes, 15.
I'm going to be out in 30 minutes, too.
All right, what's next?
Got this big piece of paper, we probably ought to do
Items.
something with it.
trying to work, but
Tree removal.
Those are your hard ones.
If I might make a point before we proceed, regarding the submission Mr. Herring sent out, I noticed that it was only copied in for commission members. In the future, when you're sharing materials for the hearing, could you please make sure you include staff on the email so we can have electronic copies and prepare for that information?
Absolutely.
A little better?
My bad.
Get him, Shannon.
Thank you.
Yeah.
all right, so the material that you guys, we can have, and Shannon, if you, oh, you're going to do it, thank you, Alexander. Especially for the commission members that were not present at the last work session, what staff was able to do is we kind of went through some proposed changes to the classifications of basic work, minor work, and major work, and then also subsequently some revisions to the applicable standards. Largely, these were all welcomed by the folks, I believe it was David, Ann, Eric, and Tom. So John and Richard, we'd like to have your input if we could, and maybe have a final consideration on these specific changes pretty soon if we could.
Like today.
The one sticking point on the basic work session that we did want to solicit more input from the commission members was the classification of the removal of dead or diseased trees along the street in front of a residence, which is there as the last item. It's in red and underlined. The question becomes, well, it says, by virtue of being a basic work item, you don't need approval from either the staff or the commission. So there's some concern over that. How was it determined? Is there a determination? We will tell you that staff has to make a determination with the property owner whether or not a proposal is even a minor or basic work item, minor work, or major work. The additional language that staff had kind of proposed to see if this could help is to add language, upon receiving documentation or presenting documentation to the village planner by someone stating that the tree is dead or it's otherwise diseased or somehow unhealthy. There were talks about maybe moving that and elevating it to where it does require some sort of approval or, something that the village staff is giving you saying, Mr. Taylor, you can take your tree down because it is now deemed dead or diseased.
But one little clarification though, Alex, on that. you say, I mean, not everybody has to come before you and say, is this basic or is this minor? If there's a checklist, they may just say, oh, look, I can do it, I don't have to talk to staff, right? So,
But technically, we're supposed to make that determination.
but there's
Then
no
we need to put words
requirement.
in the standards.
We
then
can do
to-
that. It's very easy.
Okay.
Upon
I just-
consulting with village staff, and,
Oh, okay.
and we, I mean, that's
That's
pretty
good.
common. I mean, how many, Alexandra, you've been here since June. Shannon, I think you've even fielded several phone calls. People are, I mean, they call us all the time. Do I need anything? No, you're good. We will deem that to be basic work. You wouldn't need any approval.
Yeah,
It's
that's-
good to have a paper trail of that or email communication or something that we have, which is, again, but if we can clarify that, you need to consult with village staff
Yeah.
to determine what level your project falls
That
in.
needs
That's
to be in
good.
the standards.
That's good.
If you're going to do that, because otherwise, yes, you get a lot of phone calls, but how many people are doing this work that you never know about?
Yeah, that's true.
Is
I
that
mean,
tr-
I could go do 10 things on here and never call you, and you wouldn't know I even did them.
Is that true for everything in basic work?
That's how I've always applied it. I mean,
Does it so say, does it say that in the standard somewhere specifically? So I don't think it does.
No.
But that's what
Right
we're
now, it
talking
does
about
not.
adding now, right? Because I'll tell you, I look at the checklist and I don't go to you guys. I just say, oh, look, I can do this.
Yeah.
Richard?
That would be
You're the
my-
only other one in the district, I just confessed.
Oh, I would do the
You
same thing.
perfectly on record said you look at the checklist, so you covered yourself.
I think a simple statement saying that would make all the difference.
I
So
agree.
right now, it says if there's any doubt, so we can easily change that. Consult with the village planner for a determination of whether or not you're,
Yeah, that's the kind of words we need to put in there, though.
As a
So,
duty.
yeah,
Yeah.
we are required to do that. And then 5 will get you 10 says that grows into some kind of signature thing before it's over, but anyway.
My reaction to number 16 is that it's just fine as you're proposing.
Eric, how are we proposing to go through this? I had a couple of minor comments, and they're all minor. but-
Okay. Go ahead.
So with respect to both 16 and under major work, section 10, in both cases, we reference the removal of trees on the street side of the property. We don't address removal of trees elsewhere. Is that intentional?
I think the intent for that is to preserve that historic streetscape. The standard is the overall canopy. That has been sort of the consistent language since the adoption of the historic district in 2006. But if there's something that needs to be identified, that, there's maybe, if that needs to be revisited,
My
we
point is,
certainly will.
if these are the guidelines, and I have a 14-inch diameter tree in my backyard,
Good point.
this doesn't tells me that I have to come and talk to you about it. I can just go get the chainsaw and knock that sucker down.
correct.
As long as that's what we intend, that's fine.
I don't agree with that.
I'm not, you don't agree that that's the interpretation, or that is what it ought to be?
That it ought to include trees, period. Canopies in the backyard, canopies easily visible from the street.
But that's not what this says.
Right. Yeah.
So if we are, I guess that's better said. If the standard is the canopy, then the concept of street facing, while that has certain applications, is not the only application.
You can just remove street
And-
facing. It should just be any tree on the property. Because right-of-way is outside of this, and that's handled by utilities village. So it could just be, it doesn't even have to be street facing. We're not concerned about historic streetscape. We're concerned about everything that's historic, right?
Right.
And then maybe
I
put a
agree.
caliper size dimension in there, because you already have that elsewhere in the UDO, I believe. Change.
And if the commission wants to consider presenting to village council that removal of any tree greater than 12 inches diameter breast height on the property.
Then you get back into our canopy issue again.
What does our
I
standard say
think
about
that's
the
what I would
canopy?
do.
It shouldn't unreasonably compromise a historic canopy, a historic tree
But
canopy.
it doesn't say front or streets or,
Where is that? Just as a
It's
general
it's
guideline?
under site features in landscaping section. What direction do you guys like us to proceed?
I vote any tree.
With the size requirement.
Yeah, and the rest of the language, removal of dead or diseased trees, take out along the street
The
front.
12 dBH, I think, is pretty standard. Head nods,
So it would be basic work. It still would be basic work.
if it's
though.
dead or diseased.
Yeah.
What
Dead or
Tom is
diseased.
getting at is, I'm sorry, John, sorry. Does the commission want to consider changing that it take street side out?
I vote yes.
So if it's dead, disease, it's healthy, it's 12 dBH or greater, no matter where it is on your property. That's the question.
For major work now, you're
I mean, if
talking.
it's dead and diseased,
Period.
what are you gonna do with it anyway? I mean, let it fall over and then deal
Well,
with it?
I think too with the major work too, so just, instead of it being specific to street side property, should it be just,
Removal of trees is item number 10 under major work.
And item number
And so we-
16 in
we-
basic work.
Well, let's do one at a time. We strike the words along the street side of the property, then that is doing what I think David is proposing and what seems to me to make sense, and it seems to me that's what we've been doing. We've usually run into removal of trees because they're in the way of proposed construction or an addition or whatever it is, so we get those cases anyway, but this is.
Especially if it's a corner lot, it could make, well, that's street side too, I guess, but, I don't know.
just keep in mind though, if the commission does want to make that change, that it's classified that, you're just going to get used to seeing that, applicable standard in each and every application, that a building footprint or a pool or anything like that. That's nothing.
There's two different issues here, so I think I agree with Eric. We need to address them separately. One is trees, and the other one is dead and diseased trees. Basic work is dead and disease, and major work is trees, dead or diseased otherwise.
I think in both cases, the location on the site is irrelevant.
Let's talk about the specific wording. Which one we gonna do first? I'm
I
confused.
vote for what Eric proposed for number 10, and a similar change, number 16, removal of dead or diseased trees that are not in the right-of-way after providing documentation, so on and so forth.
But it needs to be major work if they're
And-
dead and diseased?
10
Oh.
makes no reference to whether the tree is dead or diseased.
Right, that's my point.
That's right.
The
I'm
diameter.
I'm not moving one from one category to another. I'm just removing the stipulation about where the tree is, that's all.
But I don't think a dead and diseased tree needs to go to major work. If I've got a dead or
No, 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 no,
diseased
no.
tree in my backyard,
Okay.
We're not changing
All right,
categories.
let me step in real quick, because I think I might see the miscommunication. Tom, when it comes to the major work, that would be anything breast height 12 inches diameter that's not dead or
Healthy,
diseased.
yeah.
it would be all.
No.
Well, no, it's not dead or
Correct,
diseased,
not
correct.
dead or diseased. So I think what you're trying to get to is adding maybe an addition there on 10 in the major work, where removal of trees 12 inches or larger in diameter at breast height, not in the right of way and outside of dead or diseased.
No,
That's
okay,
good. So you
let's-
want,
just like Eric.
no, then I guess maybe,
Let's just start with the basic work, what's in front of us. Yeah. Let's just do that. Okay, so, just like Alexandria said, for this one, it would read, removal of dead or diseased trees that are not in the right-of-way after providing documentation to the village planner from I just threw landscape professional, it could be from any professional or whatever you want to say.
I vote yes.
Along the street front is being
Correct.
deleted.
The location is the only thing that would remove.
So cross out the words along the street front. And
I
that's
think-
what it would say.
I think that's fine from my standpoint for that one, for 16.
Good, okay.
Now for 10.
One.
Now for
Now for 10.
To major work,
Removal of trees 12 inches and larger, we could say removal of healthy trees. 12 inches and larger in diameter at breast height. Period. Or yeah, and not in the right of way.
Right?
Okay, to throw a wrench into it, why is this major work?
Because the
able to-
subjective criteria of the applicable standard. Unreasonably compromised the historic tree
Oh, okay.
canopy.
We have to remove the word pine from Pinehurst.
Trees are our friends.
Or us.
Adding in, not in the right of way.
And healthy. And removing street side of a property. So let me
If
try
it's an unhealthy tree in the backyard, I can do it as basic work. If it's a healthy tree in the backyard,
Major work.
Or anywhere,
Anywhere in the
anywhere in the yard.
anywhere in the yard, then it has to go to major work.
That then covers all the situations.
I agree. So I can
Now,
still
keep
chop my
in
dead one
mind.
down in the backyard.
That's going to bring
have
a
a
lot more
12
major work items to this group.
If I have a
For tree
12-inch
removal.
tree that's diseased, it's basic.
Correct.
Got it, okay.
But if you have a healthy 13-inch
Got it.
diameter breast height anywhere on your
Got it.
property that's not in the right of way, you're coming to the HPC.
And I think this group would argue that if you replace the roof and you replace 20-year-old shingles and you went a slightly different gray color, that may not nearly be as impactful as someone cutting down a beautiful old oak tree in the back of their
Could be.
yard.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah, one can be changed, the other toast.
Okay, let's go.
Next, on swimming pools, spas, and hot tubs.
Okay.
Where you at?
Hold on a minute. Are we good with the minor work changes?
Sorry.
Anything else in minor work?
So I'm sorry, on 5, going to just a straight square footage, we're getting away from this concept of what the dimensions are. I actually happen to like.
Okay, so you like the 144 square feet, or whatever that square, just because it's square footage and not a dimension?
Exactly.
Okay.
Hot tubs. Hot tub
Now
time.
I'm confused. Are we still on basic work?
We're
or
on-
not?
Minor work.
Minor work.
Minor work. Was there anything else on basic work?
Not that I had.
Okay.
That was the last
Okay.
item that carried over.
Well, we got some new people, so I thought there might be something.
That was the main item we needed,
Yep,
we wanted their
okay.
feedback for. And, good point, after for the minor work stuff that we talked a lot about, we have removed from the last meeting the extension or renewal, and we're just going to stick it somewhere else. That way it doesn't require another COA. You may recall that discussion. So that is the change that happened from the 21st. Again, the bigger items are additions and accessory buildings in the rear yard only. And then the change for that John pointed out in the square footage for the demolition, just to be consistent with the other one.
So in terms of my comments, that brings me to D. Number 2, talk about hot tub must not exceed 8 feet in any dimension. No, I don't know, I'm just pointing out, if my hot tub is 7 feet by 7 feet, the diagonal dimension is almost 10.
Good point. I like that.
If it's,
How do we
Like
apply
the way
the
you think.
dimension? If it's oval, oblong, square, rectangle?
I didn't like any dimension, because I doubt we'll have anything that are 15 feet deep.
Right. But the dimension diagonally would definitely be longer than
I think
any
part of the
other.
concern was, well, I think the main concern was how high above ground it will be, right? Isn't that what we were getting at by doing any
That's what
dimension?
we should write. 'Cause that's
Huh?
not, then that's what we should write, because that's not what has been written.
I agree. Absolutely agree. Length, width, and height.
Does not exceed a height
Of
Yeah,
X
A width.
width.
or circumference or the height of, what, 3 feet?
About 4 feet.
3 and 4?
Height of the spa itself, it's what if you put it on a platform?
Wasn't it like, we saw,
Platform's 4 feet, and then the thing sits up another 4 feet, and now it's,
and so what's the answer to that?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just here to ask questions.
No, that's a good,
I do not
yeah.
have
That's a
answers.
good question.
yeah, I don't think, I mean, it's a very good point as we're trying to find a dimension here, but I don't think we're going to have someone build a 6-foot tall platform and then put a 4-foot tall.
Well, that should be
I could
considered
see
part of
putting,
the
I
height,
could see
right?
putting a spa on top of a deck on the back of the house
But that's when we would send that as a major work at that point. If we have a question about the platform or the way of which it's being implemented, as staff, we can always err on the side of caution and bring it forward.
What can we say, including platform as to the
Well,
height?
Well,
No?
is there a problem if
Height
someone
above
has
grade.
a,
Yeah,
what if
there you
some, okay, well, think
4
about it.
feet above grade.
If someone has a deck, by virtue, it's got to be basically within the building envelope unless it's got a 5-foot extra encroachment, which we allow in the PDO. So by virtue, a deck's going to be, aside from these nonconformities that we do have in the historic district, it's probably not going to be visible, especially if it's in the rear yard. So if someone has a deck that's 6 foot above grade, and they have a 32-inch tall hot tub on the top,
Major work. I say 4 feet above grade, everything else, major work. Grade.
I mean, if you have a back deck that's 5 foot off grade, and you want to put a 32-inch hot tub on
I'm
top,
thinking
it's
about an
major work.
approval we did, it was for a, if I recall, it was for a garage on a very sloping lot. The garage was detached, but because of the nature of the lot, there really wasn't any other way to do it other than the way they were proposing to do it.
Could have a substantial grade in your back, so meaning your deck is pretty high above grade.
Oh, wait a minute. Above-ground hot tubs and spas must not exceed 8 feet in any dimension. Doesn't say anything about a platform. It says the spa. So
Exactly.
if we have a concern about whether the hot tub is sitting on top of some other structure, we got to address that. But that's not what this standard says.
Well, if we limit the top of the spa to 4 feet above grade, that handles
Don't
that.
say that.
That's right. That's why I'm suggesting that we do say that.
Well, because they're not in ground, yes, that's the problem.
But the platform could be a paver, you know, an inch.
There's probably a lot of beef, there's a lot of teeth we gotta add to that, you know, that we're not gonna decide on today.
I agree. We got 10 minutes.
I don't think any dimension is the way we
No,
want.
I think length, width, height, radius, circumference, whatever, I think is a great way.
I'd be happy with that, with deferring to staff on how to sharpen that
Back to the drawing.
along those lines.
Okay?
And were we going to define those terms or not? Okay.
I mean, we have the definitions. We can, I mean, it's just, there'd be a little redundant in having them here and having them applied, because they're going to be applied for building code, they're going to be applied in the development ordinance, but what's the harm?
And my last one on fences and walls, number 14. Rear and side yard fences must not be taller than 6 feet. Outside was a limit to 4 or 4.5.
And that's what this proposed change would do, is to allow now in the standard for a 6-foot tall fence in the side yard. However, it would have to meet that setback that I think David suggested, the 20-foot at the last meeting.
And then if that's the case,
You Need to change the diagram.
then the diagram would have to change.
I think Alexandria has a lot of ideas on some of the existing diagrams anyway. I think we can have a much better, I mean, that's simple, but it gets the job done. But we would obviously need to revise that.
I have a similar, are you done, John?
I have one more.
Okay.
But if it's on fences, let's do it now.
Yes, it is on fences. Sorry.
Do it now.
Let me get back to where I had my note. It's now number 6. It says, the vertical board width of not less than 4 inches. Well, we all know that that would be a nominal 4 inches. If we state it as such, fine. Otherwise, we should say 3.5 inches. 1 by 4. Similarly, not more than 10 inches, which is 9.25 inches. 1 by 10. Assuming that's what we,
Talking physical dimension versus dimensional lumber.
Well,
That's
it
right.
does say nominal. It says nominal. So how we have applied, again.
oh yeah, sorry, I missed the
yeah,
word nominal.
and
Might
what that
be
is-
clearer to the public if we just put numbers in there. I don't know.
I don't,
Nominal, I think, is close enough that you go do it, otherwise you're gonna end up eating it and have
Fi-
to make a
Fine,
decision
I
on a
missed the
quarter
word
bigger.
nominal, so I'm good.
On the fences, John, sorry, and I'm gonna have to run off after this. I applied, I want to put a fence on my property, really got a fence, and it would be in a decorative snake rail fence like you would see in Charlottesville, Virginia, split rail, and they kind of dry stack, and they kind of zigzag. The reason I do that
Are you
is,
looking for approval right now from us? Oh, okay.
I don't want to mess with tree roots, and I found these beautiful adelphos on the corner as being taken out of the weeds, and I thought it'd be beautiful to snake it through those trees, only about 1.5 feet, purely decorative, old school, historic in nature. That fence is not allowed in here, and the fence, to put that fence up, it's going to cost less than $500, but the fee to come, it's almost astronomical to do on that road. So I've been driving over the last 2 or 3 months through the village, and there's probably 150 different fences in the village. And so the bigger issue here, not issue, but we may want to look at expanding what our recommended fences and our template fences in this are, because we've got 3 or 4, but the neighbors, the Wicker family across from me have a split rail fence, which is not really encouraged. And then in Rusty Wicker Park, we've got snake rail at the entrances. So we've got an amalgamation of 500 different styles. And I think it would, someone who is coming in who is proposing a new style, going, well, my neighbor's got this, but, well, that was 11 years ago before we did the standard. So big picture, I think it would be nice if we could approve on some more aesthetic historical styles and expand that list of fence styles in the village, because they're already there.
I completely agree. Couldn't be more
and
historic.
two real quick points. Rassy Wicker's outside. Two, this is not a Richard Vincent clause. The reason why I personally placed this in there is because that fence type wasn't spoken to. So I think it needs to be spoken to. Before, it wasn't even saying explicitly allowed or disallowed. It's an allowable fence type by the development ordinance, so we need to adjust our historic standards to even allow for it. The appropriate location based on a survey of the historic district is definitely what I would say. If you guys are looking for a task or some homework, this would be a great one. To go and canvass the historic district and see what type of fencing is there.
But Richard reminds me that the burden's on the applicant, and bringing in samples from throughout the district is really helpful in an application too.
And the reason for the around the street side again is because the intent and the description, the lead into for fences that typically front yard or street facing yard fences or the yards are typically open. And the standard has always been that it's going to be, if you're going to have a fence or a wall, it's going to be typically the white picket, very short, or the like wrought iron look, again, very short, or, you know, the pierced brick has something, it has that historic character or special character that you see. So that was the all intent.
Yeah, well, and it's really just, that's not my pitch, because you have to expose this as ex parte communication. Eventually come before this group, but,
Yeah, we'll all have to recuse because we've already talked about it, so good luck.
Update that list, and really it'd be a nice, I guess it'd be just a nice example to run through the history of the village and how many fences and styles there do exist, because there are.
Or to have photos in our standards maybe that show what is acceptable.
This is North Carolina,
Not
not New England.
responsible for consideration of the fees that are required either, so.
Approved.
Anything else on that one, Richard? My last one, under shutters and awnings, number 10. Canvas or woven fabrics are the allowable awning materials. Are those truly the only allowable?
Where are you reading number 10? I'm sorry.
Shutters and awnings
It's the very last page.
Yep.
Next to the last page.
used to be 5B, is now number 10 in the amendment. Next, to the penultimate item.
On the very last page, David, and the next to last.
Sorry, I'm caught up.
Are canvas or woven fabrics the only allowable awning materials?
Opposed to what, metal, wood, I suppose you could have wood.
We seem to be setting a standard here
And maybe that's exactly what we intend to do, in which case I'm fine with it.
Canvas, woven, or metal. I do, there are metal awnings prevalent, so I think that would be a good add.
Either there should be more here, or we should put only in there. I'm not sure what, but to make it more
Why
specific.
aren't we making any restriction at all? Why are we addressing this at all?
Because this is, so we could have an objective standard if staff
Instead
could
of being
apply.
it's
And for the same reason, I think that we specify what types of siding we allow and lots of other things. We do want some standard as to what you can do.
Can you
so
give
that
an
it's not-
example of metal that aren't the old, the old like 1950s?
They're
That's a-
fixed, so I mean, they're fixed and not retractable, I guess.
Right.
I don't know if that's in here. I mean, it's just brackets.
Are there any
Is
that
this,
we
is
have?
this language intended to mean that canvas and woven fabric are the only allowable awning materials?
That's the way it reads, so yeah, should we say,
If that's what we want to say, then we ought to put the word only in there.
I don't think we want to say that.
Okay, now
Well,
that,
I
that's.
guess I would beg to differ on
Now,
the metal.
If we say only, then that means that if somebody wants to put in something else, they have to come to us.
Right.
But this is major, minor, right? So you wanted specific guidance, in
yeah,
other
so I
words,
mean,
right?
canvas, woven fabric, or metal are the only allowable awning materials.
No, I'm
I-
thinking-
I would-
mean,
I would-
Umbrella makes a product which is synthetic. I don't, it's not cloth, it's not fabric in the way it is cloth.
Synthetics are considered fabrics.
What
They
kind of
market it
awnings
as a
do we
fabric.
want to exclude? What do we want
I
to bar?
have a picture in my mind of a metal awning that you see in the mobile home parks.
Yeah, okay, so no tacky.
That's perfect word.
Jackie is very clear.
Well, I would say the majority of them that are coming forward now, at least in our world, like the Harris Teeter Shopping Center, you see a vertical metal awning, those are incredibly expensive.
And
Metal awnings or aluminum is a preferable, more hard-wearing, durable product. Sometimes the canvas can fatigue, tire, fade, et cetera. So I think there's lots of attractive metal canopies out there. We use most of the time.
I think on some of the commercial applications specifically. So I don't think you'll see what you referenced, correct.
And I was thinking back to kind of, we used to prohibit vinyl windows, and now we've heard enough testimony from builders that we now
They're
allow
right
them
there.
because they're less costly to maintain, and they
So what I've done is I've brought up some imagery from Google of just right downtown.
That's Market
And
Square,
yeah, and you can see that there's a couple different types of awnings right here. This is an example of metal as well as canvas.
I guess I wouldn't exclude metal, but I'd like it to be major work.
I don't think I have a strong personal view as to what it ought to be, other than I think the way we have written it is probably not what we intend to say.
Yeah, I agree.
But as David said, if it is metal, then it could be major work, right?
But I would think an awning is major work, period.
I mean, well,
Placement.
Yeah, replacing
that
kind,
hasn't
okay.
been the
but
case.
If I'm replacing like for like, I would hope that's not major.
I agree.
But even in the rear, if they're putting up
I mean, we,
that should be major?
awnings have always been minor work, so is there a problem? Is there a judgment that you don't trust staff to
Well,
make?
somebody, I guess I've just now
Opening your eyes to
becoming
it.
concerned about those ugly ones. I mean, or Eric's
Have you
better
seen
word,
any?
those tacky ones.
Have you seen any?
Nope, haven't.
I think it's future staff he might be concerned about, not the current staff.
Yes, I'm happy to defer to staff to rethink exactly how to write that, because I don't think what we've written is what we want.
I agree.
To be,
And if that rattlesnake corridor comes through, which is still historic, and you're gonna see more commercial mixed-use application on that corridor, it is gonna start coming up.
It will be a more,
Yeah.
I have to excuse myself.
So do I.
Conference call. Thank you so much. It was good seeing everyone.
Good to see you, Richard.
Welcome back.
Yeah.
Did you bring your blue suede shoes?
Aye,
Thanks.
You, Richard.
2 weeks. We have a meeting in 2 weeks, right?
Yeah, we'll talk about the next one, the 2-week point.
Oh, let's
Or
look at
somebody
this
will
one
send
right
me an
now.
email.
We have a formal meeting in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
right?
I think we can evaluate then where we can meet again. Because there's no way with getting prepared for the meeting in 2 weeks that staff would have time to. I mean, there's a couple little minor things, obviously, based on the conversation we had today that won't take any time to
But we're
make
gonna,
some changes.
we're gonna keep going, right, beyond this?
I don't want to lose any momentum, even if it means more work.
I'm sorry?
I don't want to lose the momentum that we're.
Yeah,
starting
no,
with,
but
so, yeah.
we're not done, right?
I'm not done.
We've got, I mean, there's more, right?
Thank you,
Well,
Tom.
I mean, in the future, there's still more, right?
Oh, yeah, not just these sections,
right.
absolutely, no, there's a few more, yeah.
Alex, do you have a sense of how many cases we're going to have at our next regular hearing?
Yeah, it's going to be 5 plus the one that was continued. Five new applications. and
Heard
the one that's
anything
continued.
further from the one we continued? Because I wasn't at all sure he was going to pursue it, but,
Needs a new roof.
yeah, but he
We will definitely
placed it in
continue to follow
kind.
up with them. Okay, just point of reference real quick. I was wanting to look at the previous standards and guidelines before we change the current version we have. All awning should be canvas, metal, or woven fabric. That was the previous standard that had been in place since 2006.
Oh, okay.
Pretty,
Metal was in there.
yes, and that all awning, we could change it to be must be canvas, metal, or woven fabric. And that the color needs to be obviously compatible with the building and the color palette.
It's a
Still doesn't
standard that
preclude
deviates
someone
it
coming
from the
before
code.
us with something else, and we would then consider it.
Make a case
There
for it.
won't, I mean, if it's metal.
That's
Yeah, it's interesting.
That's 9 words that pretty well,
But should we specify that metal or not?
what
We
kind of
Put
metal?
in that clause, no tacky stuff.
Like a gauge or?
Well, we've got sort of the shed-like metal awnings, and then there's the copper-like ones, right?
Both metal are fine, huh? It's the tacky ones I'm sure we all have a mental image of.
But that's up to staff to decide.
There's,
All of those, except for the one you got your mouse on right now.
green aluminum is probably not something that I would like to see,
Right.
but most of the other ones,
Number 1 and number 6, or number 1 and number 7?
farther down there, the brown one's the same thing.
Yep, we're right there in the yellow wall.
Okay.
That's
So
the
let's not
picture of
get
what I
caught up
have.
in the pictures on Google, but ultimately what this is showing you is the majority of the metal awning types that come before us for commercial or residential, it has to meet the characteristic of the home in order for the standard to apply. So, I mean, if they come in here with a bright green metal aluminum, awning for a all-white home with black shutters, that may not, that would be elevated likely to a major work and brought before the hearing if we had a question.
Yeah, but up above, you've got a white on a white, so that fits kind of,
Yes, but the
doesn't
style of that
scream out,
awning,
But maybe it's the type
these are
of-
not things that these aren't the images we would utilize in our document. We're going to show examples of what's here already.
You're going to show example, that's, yeah, okay.
Yes, but I
Okay.
brought this up because I wanted you all to see, currently, we allow it, and we've not had an issue with it.
So, just curious, if the staff were to encounter the one up a little bit from your mouse, up, down, 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 down.
The green or the
Bottom
black
right
on the
corner.
yellow?
Bottom right corner. That one. If you saw that, would you advance it?
I'd have to see the application and the house that you're going to draw it on.
Looks like the house it's on right now.
If it's existing, there's a couple.
Oh, no,
of
not
things.
existing,
I know,
brand new.
there's-
But you see how there's many variables, though. There's a lot that plays into a decision. It's not just a yes or no, black and white, which is why we have the standards in the hearing
Let me
process.
ask it a different way. If you were to encounter that, would it be major work?
I don't know. I'd have to look at the application, and I'd have to look at the existing conditions, and
Okay, so then we need to write some language that would not allow that somehow.
I think there'd be a couple of things. First of all, are there any other examples?
Yes.
On
if
what
you-
basis is it congruous?
Or not. yeah.
But we're trying to save staff from making those discretionary, I thought. Give more, well, That's,
I think it's likely to come before us. I don't know how you would write a prescriptive thing that will cover absolutely all of these cases.
Then
That's why
maybe awning should be major work.
Let's try to think again like this, like I keep, is there identified problem?
No. And.
You mean, have we encountered a problem?
But if
Yes.
if I own a commercial property in the village and I have a canvas awning that is white, and it either gets ripped in a storm or it's just getting faded and dirty, and I want to replace it with another one that looks exactly the same, I don't think that should be major work.
I agree.
So I'm content that awnings are not necessarily major work. They may in certain circumstances be as deemed by staff, typically because of the nature of the awning that itself is being proposed, and particularly relative to the structure of the building itself.
I can promise you that staff feels the same about the character of the Pinehurst Historic District as you do.
none of this is to cast aspersions on staff. It's like if you guys decide to get a job in another community one day and you're starting from scratch with somebody who doesn't know the area, it's supposed to be guidance for the future people too, right? Is the point. So it's not a lack of trust or faith in you at all. That's all. I just.
We're lucky to
guidance
be
is
in
guidance,
Pinehurst.
huh? What's that?
So we're lucky to be in Pinehurst.
We're glad you're here.
Thank you.
Well,
Same.
I'm lost. If we're going to say that metal awnings are allowable, then you're going to allow them. If we don't want metal awnings, then we're saying they're not allowable. So then you're not going to allow them. We're not going to write something that says metal awnings are allowable if we think they look good,
But
even
are
though
there
that's
not-
what we'd like.
Are there not also other guidelines governing awnings?
Section right there.
I thought,
Awnings must be based on historic awning
Oh, right.
profiles. So new awning, well, yes, it should. Must be compatible with the colors and must be in the color palette. Can you scroll? Hold on a minute. We're going to scroll up a little bit.
wasn't there also
Is that,
something with regard to size
That's
of
not
the
basic. or-
size of
We're not
the
talking about whether
writing?
it's basic or not. It's just the standard, right?
Yeah, these are the
signage?
So
Say they must be compatible and color.
I'm okay as it is.
Each shutter, that's a shutter, 8 shutters. Okay, so there's, what, 3 applicable standards right now for awnings. John mentioned too the signage, we do have, under the signage section that it has to be on the bottom flap only.
It can't be electronic, if I recall. Can't be
like-
flashing neon.
Yeah, and it's got to be professionally etched or painted.
This is on the awnings you're talking still, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I agree with Eric that we ought to specifically say metal is an acceptable material, and I think otherwise awnings are well covered already.
Agree.
So we can have the similar language like what was in the older guidelines, that awnings must be, what was it? Canvas, woven fabric, or metal.
Although I think canvas and woven material, woven fabric and canvas are the same thing.
Well, unless I guess there's some other synthetic maybe type materials. I don't-
That
But
fits
if you
under
look
woven
up Sunbrella, they're marketing their stuff as a woven fabric. That's what they call it.
It's not canvas.
No, it's not
But
canvas.
canvas would fit under woven fabric, wouldn't it?
Right, so we could strike the word canvas and simply say woven fabric.
About canvas or woven fabric. Well, anyway, I think we're still checking the box.
Yeah. Yep.
Barely a quorum as it is.
1, 2, well,
I think this has been very productive, and I don't see any,
I do too.
It was nice to have Richard and John.
they,
Thank you.
yes, absolutely. So, I'm not sure. All right, I will entertain a motion that we adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. We are adjourned.